Glad to see Merle Vokey down there because he gave me a hard time up in Plum Point on this topic. Now, Merle, you keep quiet. You're only on the planning committee.
See, they're all afraid to get up.
No, don't be. When you have a chance to read through the paper, you'll get a better chance to think about it because it's a lot to get hove at you at one point. What I'm trying to put across to you, however, very seriously, is there is a lot more going on in this province than people realize. If you listen to the CBC radio news, nothing happened at the Down NTA conference until Bill McKim. Until Bill McKim went head-to-head with Tom this morning. That's the first report they had. The television had, as you might expect, missed Sherman Stride's presentation that I referred to earlier completely, and had little clips talking about a nonsensical thing. If the system is afraid of being examined, the system is being examined and re-examined and over-examined, and we tore it apart as a joint DEC committee. And that report, I'm convinced, is going to form the basis of a lot of interdenominational cooperation to a degree that we haven't seen to this point. And I'm convinced, Art, that it will be a lot more than incremental change because the climate is ready for it.
Well, I wouldn't question that at all, Bill, that maybe it won't be. But what I am saying is that there are some serious barriers, right? And that these are somehow going to have to be overcome. I stress back to something I said earlier, that to talk about, we talk about the success of interdenominational cooperation in this thing. The fact remains that fewer than 1/2% of the students in Newfoundland and Labrador are educated under joint service agreements. For all the talk, for all the whatever, that's the number of students we're talking about. So, I certainly applaud the efforts of the councils and whoever, right, to bring this about. But let's not look upon it as though it were going on everywhere, because it isn't going on everywhere. And the numbers that we're talking about are, in terms of the total population of school students, incidental. So let's recognize it for what it is. Now, what goes on in the future is another thing altogether. But recognize, to this point, today,
what has been planned to this point is very real today. Tom, is the 1/2% anyway close to reality? That's twice now that's been used. I've never worked it out. There's no trouble to work it out. Well, what's it going to be 5 years' time, Art? What's it going to be 5 years' time based on what you heard today in the areas in which they're cooperating? You won't change it tomorrow. If the number of schools goes from 547, which it is today, to 450, which is going to be there, it'll take 10 years because of existing buildings. Well, then you're looking at a very different ball game in relation to number of students being educated in joint services. Not that that's the be-all and the end-all. Not that that's the ideal. There are many people in this province for which the ideal is and will continue to be a school of their own denomination, and they will continue in that situation. It's not true of the organization that I represent here today. It's not true, I'm sorry, it is true of the organization that I represent here today with variation. The variation being the quality of education to the young people and the right of a young person to have the complete education developed in all his faculties and the opportunity, if he or she so wishes, to go into any post-secondary institution. I mentioned that before. But there is clearly a class of people for whom schools of their own denomination, taught by their teachers, continues to be the ideal. And they have every right to continue that. They're in on the study, the Pentecostal denomination. Melvin Regular was with us on a monitor capacity in that study, contributed very much to it. Long ways to go yet, however. We're going to know in a month or so as to how the school boards will come down on these recommendations and how the three councils will come down.
There's one thing, though, that you could add to all this, is that given the economic constraints, the downturn in the economy, and the financial plight of some of the school boards, right? The choices which are open to people is that people out throughout Newfoundland and Labrador may have to make some very serious choices. And the choice may very well be whether we're going to have integrated mathematics or whether we're going to have better mathematics. That may be the kind of choice. And if you're going to, it's all very well to say that everybody's entitled to this and everybody's entitled to that, and they're entitled to their religious, but in fact, some sacrifices may have to be made. And if they want to make sacrifices and say, right, we want integrated mathematics in whatever community X, fair enough. The choice is made, and you accept the program that you got, all right? But if you say, I want the best mathematics course, then you may have to engage in some kind of compromise.
Sure, choices will have to be made. Sure, sacrifices will have to be made. I mentioned scarce resources. Let's take the ridiculous example of integrated mathematics and carry it further. How many angels dance on the head of a pin? They answered that in Globe and Mail last week. Every new laser can do it. 1,144, wasn't it? Yeah. Integrated mathematics.
Speaking of angels, I just came out of another session where I was told that fools rush in. Well, this fool took his time, but he's here at the microphone. You talked about down the garden path, and I wonder if, to a certain extent, we're not on the road to Damascus, because somebody seems to have had an awful conversion very rapidly. I've seen in communities where the grassroots people have been asking for quite some time for sharing of services between the denominations in their community rather than having community schools. And it's been the school boards themselves that have appeared, at least, to have been very resistant to that. Do the DECs now feel a great amount of pressure or a lot of change in the general populace? Is this why you are not willingly, I'm assuming, but responding to their requests?
Not at all. That report that surfaced in January, remember I said started a year ago, eh? That committee was established a year ago. The community factor that you talk about is very real. And let's look around the province. Carbonear would rather have an integrated system rather than send their children up to Harbour Grace. That's what I meant when I said that community factors are stronger than, you saw what happened in Corner Brook as well, when the school boards attempted to combine schools within their own school boards, but because of the community school factor in that city. So no, there's no particular rush. I'm talking about a report that's been out in the province for a month now. I'm saying to you that because of the position which the councils and the school boards have, that they are likely to follow the principles and recommendations of that report. Can't be sure, however, but we'll know in another couple of weeks.
Anyone else? Do you have anything you would like to add to about integrated mathematics, Bill?
Now, I left one of Tom Pope's classes one time at Memorial. He's going to leave mine now? No? Oh, no.
He's coming up.
I thought you were leaving, Tom.
I can't leave sessions like this. I left the other session. I was thinking, Dr. Ponder, I want you to, not you, I don't mean you personally, but all of us to try to see what is happening in the system, see? I want you to begin now with realizing that there are 315 communities in this province that have schools. And 266 of these are schools of one denomination. And that means that you have 49 communities left. And Mr. O'Driscoll has another overhead over there. Not too difficult, Bill. I
apologize again that I misused your
Well, I
overhead.
wanna
You don't have
get
to
that
get up
one
and point it out.
I want to get that Mary Brown overhead on I was telling you about.
Okay, I'll dig it out.
Yes, sir. No, but seriously now, he will put up an overhead that will show you the names of the 40 communities in this province that have schools of 2 denominations.
I hope I get this one right. Am I supposed to leave the cover on and then lift it?
Oh yes, step number 1 is laid on. All right.
That's the one, right?
All right. Now, you can see I had to do great violence to the scale of geography in the province in order to get all the communities in, eh? Now, that will show you the 40 communities in this province that have 2 schools. 6 of these, the little star is missing from Pasadena, are joint service arrangements of different types. Some very small arrangements, some very large arrangements. Fogo would be a large arrangement with 1,050 schools, kids rather, students in that particular complex. Now, the only thing you would add to that map in terms of schools with more than 1 denomination would be 8 other communities plus 1 other community that has more than 3, namely St. John's. So altogether, if I showed them all, that would be 49, less the 6 that are there with joint service, because some of these now are very small, like St. Paul's Inlet would have a small Roman Catholic building as a school and a small integrated, and there's a small joint school system there. Same way with Sops Arm would involve small numbers of students, except when they go up from grade 3 onwards. Now, what I'm trying to say, sir, is that you just imagine now, those of us who know this province, that we could say here today and say that there are around 43 or 40 communities that have schools of 2 or more denominations. Now, that I think is a major, major change. Now, that is not to say that there's not lots and lots of incidents in that 266, when Community A is a mile or 2 from Community B. But looking at it strictly from the community base, when we once had schools in more than 800 communities, and now we're down to 315. So when you talk about change, you have to witness, Dr. Ponder, the number of the events of the late 60s, when the system underwent a major, really major change. Witness more than 700 schools restructured. Now, there's been nothing in this province that have come close to 700 being restructured. Closed out, consolidated, joint services, or what have you. Witness the change in the number of boards. 309 one time, 284 another time, 35, likely to be 29, 25 in 5 years. Enrollments keep going as they're going. It'll be in the range of 20 to 22 by the end of this present decade. Now, I am suggesting, sir, that a lot of these kinds of steps were necessary before you can move along to a next step. You kind of have to work your way along. I'm sure you do in terms of thinking, maturing, to where you move into cooperative endeavors, we like to call it. It's not only cooperative endeavors across denominational lines, but also along denominational lines. Now, when I look at the lists that we have, as when Dr. Riggs did the study, there are 24 gone off the list in less than 2 years, and by September there will be half dozen more that are gone off the list. So I just emphasize that to us, ladies and gentlemen, and if I recall correctly, that of the 315 communities, the 207 have a single school. Now, you just think about that now. 207 have a single school. And that's the kind of, a lot of this thing, as it were, is necessary, you know, before you can kind of take that step in terms of learning to run, as it were.
Tom, could I ask you a question here?
Yeah.
Although there may be only so many communities with a single school, that's only part of the picture. The other part of the picture is, what about the other, in what proximity are these communities? In some places, you can argue that there are clusters of communities, each with a school. In other areas, like Labrador, for example, Labrador East, you can argue that there are communities great distances apart. So that to say that there are this number of communities with single schools is a bit misleading in the context that you've used it, unless you put in the other part of the other piece of information.
Okay, I can cover them all.
Yes, add what I said,
I can
Tom,
cover
the
them
10,
all.
the 10 miles and the 30
right.
miles that you helped me
That's
out
right.
with.
You see, it's not misleading. I'm only putting it in the context of that we once had 8, once meaning 20 years ago, 1,266 schools. That's what once means. So I look at 315 as a significant change. Now, you would mention individual communities, like, say, in Labrador. The little sketch there would show you that there's one small community along the old Labrador coast that has 2 schools, and that's Port Hope Simpson. Pentecostal people have a nice school in Port Hope Simpson. We have a very small school in Port Hope Simpson, and we would certainly hope that that is about to change. But see, there are 55 of the isolated type schools that are beyond the 10 kilometers and beyond the 30 kilometers. In fact, there are 55 that are what one would call isolated schools, that these small schools must remain. And it works its way up to 76 if you say, well, some of them perhaps just stretch a few kilometers here or miles here, depending on the terrain and so on, that they can come. So I only present that to you not as we having arrived. This is only where the system is. As Bill is saying, that we would believe that the system will change another 100 schools. Now, you've got to kind of keep where we are in focus, you see. For example, New Brunswick would have 42 school boards, 27 Anglophone, 15 Francophone. It would have about 440 schools, but it has a different approach to schools. It has they perceive school size much different than we do. You know, Fredericton High School, for example, has 79 classrooms in it. You know, that's the difference in perception of size, and so on. So you kind of compare where we are with others in terms of that.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Pope. Is there any other comment before we wrap up here? All right, I'd like to thank...
Could I apologize again to Tom Pope for not using his favorite overhead? And could I say, I don't know if it's the road to Damascus or not, but if you call what has happened in this province in the last 17 years bits and pieces and incremental, then you better look at some of the events that occurred. I would suggest to you the next 5 years it's going to be a much more active course. I don't know for sure, but if the recommendations of the report to which I referred and summarized briefly are accepted by the bodies, well then we're going to see some much more substantial change. It's not a question of where we are, it's a question of where we've come from, it's a question of where the people want us to go. It's a question of how best can we serve the young people in whose interests we work.
All right, thanks very much, Bill, and I'd like to extend the thanks of the group to Bill O'Driscoll from the Catholic Education Council, and for the rest of you for coming and listening to, if not informative, at least spirited interaction.
I hope informative as well. There are copies available if you'd like to